Hey everyone, what's going on? Jeff here from Films at Home. And in today's video, I want to talk about a topic that has come up a lot lately in this community and is actually really important to me. And that's, why 1080p Blu-ray is still so important and so collectible, even in this new world of 4K movies. So I'll give you all my thoughts on this and give you some numbers as to why, you should still be collecting 1080p Blu-ray in a lot of cases, depending on the title, and why that's still sticking around, and even why DVD is still sticking around in this world of 4K media. So stay tuned for all that. So the main thing that got me started down the path of making this video was really some comments and things I've seen online about, lines like Paramount Presents, or a lot of Scream Factory titles, Vestron Video, some of these lines that have been coming out that have focused on 1080p Blu-ray. So I got a handful here of Paramount Presents titles. We got Trading Places, we got The Golden Child, we got Court Jester with a 6K scan, Elizabethtown Love Story. A lot of these movies had not had a Blu-ray release as of yet. And that's why, even though I decided, kind of a long time ago that I thought that this could have been a great line for 4K, that's why I changed my mind and I said, you know what, Paramount Presents is actually a really good line. It's a great line for collectors, and just because it's Blu-ray doesn't mean we should be poo-pooing that line and putting it down. It's actually a very important line for physical media collectors. And now let me explain sort of where this is coming from, because people have asked me this question and I did a little research on this. The big thing I always talk about is there are hundreds of thousands of movies that have been made in just say the last 100 years, right? And the number I actually got was about 400,000. There's about 400,000 movies that have been made since, say, 1920. And there's this report out there, it's a Blu-ray and DVD media report, which categorizes and tracks how many movies have actually made their way to physical media in one form or another. And so if we look at this report here, we're looking at, starting again, 400,000, say that's your key number of movies released over the last 100 years. Maybe even take out 100,000 of those because they were lost or they have copyright issues. There's still a lot of that going on. But say there's somewhere 325,000 movies that could be released. Now, interestingly enough, DVD has actually done a pretty good job of this. If you look at the numbers, there have been 245,000 roughly DVDs released as of last week, March 2021, first week of March. So that's actually an extraordinary number and is higher than I thought. You're talking about maybe only 100,000 movies there, which is still obviously a massive number. But there's a lot of coverage. More than 50% of, say, the available media out there for movies is actually available on DVD. And so that right there, when people ask me, well, how does DVD still sell 60% of the media in this country? That's an easy way to explain that. There's just simply hundreds of thousands of available DVDs, so more supply, more purchases, they're going to have more market share, and there's more titles that are available on DVD than there certainly are on Blu-ray. Now, if we look at 1080p Blu-ray, even though this format has been out there, say, since roughly 2006, right? 2007 is where it really started to ramp up. So basically almost 15 years, we still only have about 28,000 Blu-rays. So you're talking about between 10 and 11% of actual DVDs that have been manufactured have made their way onto an HD format in Blu-ray. So now when we think of that in terms of how many movies have been made, that's obviously a very, very small number. And this is why, lines like Paramount Presents that are putting things out in HD, like The Golden Child, are really important, because those have only ever made it to DVD, and even though they're not doing 4K, they are providing a service by bulking up that Blu-ray catalog. We're getting more HD physical media, which is still lacking by over 200,000 titles compared to DVD. So you can see how much of a gap there is to make up. And that's why even in this world of 4K media, you're still going to see lots and lots and lots of Blu-ray releases in 1080p, because first of all, not everything needs a 4K release. Not everything will sell on 4K. And I'll talk about how niche the 4K market is in a minute. And that's a huge reason why movies don't go to 4K. But second of all, it's just great to have HD transfers. Even these Paramount Presents lines, which are all remastered in 4K, just getting an HD master of that on a Blu-ray disc right now is a much better experience than we were previously given on a DVD. So now as we look into 4K, this is where it gets really interesting, because 4K, I'd say, we're about at the 5-6 year mark for 4K. So it's had time as a format to kind of grow, but surprisingly, it's growing at a much slower rate than Blu-ray did. To date, there's only been 759 4K Blu-ray releases out there. So that's roughly 3% of the available 1080p Blu-rays. So that's really a tiny, tiny percentage of the available media out there. Obviously, we're talking about 750 of, say, 325, 350,000. It's a tiny percentage of DVD with 245,000, and just 3% of 1080p Blu-rays have made their way to 4K. So this is why I say that Blu-ray still remains very important, and even myself as a huge 4K enthusiast, obviously I love 4K, I do 4K reviews, I have a 4K TV and the whole setup, I love the way those discs look, but I'm also realistic about the fact that even at its best, if 4K does 10% of what Blu-ray ever did, so we're talking, maybe there end up being 3,000 4K discs at some point, I think that would be a lot, and that means we are missing out on a ton of physical media. Hence why Blu-ray sales are still stronger than 4K. There's more availability, there's more titles, and there's more people who are still in that area for technology versus 4K, and hence why DVD sales are still so huge. I still buy DVDs. I'll be totally honest. There's TV shows and there's movies that you can only get on DVD. I want to own a physical copy. You may not be able to find them on streaming. And a lot of these could be older movies too. Turner Classic Movies owns a huge catalog of old classic movies, and they really only release their stuff on DVD for the most part. So if you want to own those movies, you've got to go get them on DVD, and that's your only way to physically own them. So please don't think that by supporting a line like Paramount Presents that you're shunning 4K by any means. Chances are these movies barely made it to Blu-ray, and they have no shot at coming to 4K. So if you want a physical copy, that's the best you can do right now, and it's probably the best you'll ever be able to do. Now, there's obviously other things here. The other reality of the situation is it costs money to upgrade to 4K, so many people still collect Blu-rays, but I'm really focused on those people like myself. You're a 4K enthusiast, you've upgraded, and this is why Blu-ray is so important. Now, even myself being this huge 4K fan, I only have about half the 4K discs. I was shocked actually that there were so many, 759 as of last week, because I only have about 300 in my collection, which means there's 450 discs out there that I don't even have yet, and I consider myself to be one of the largest 4K collectors, certainly of anybody that I know, and probably one of the largest online as well. So that was really interesting to me, that even as a 4K enthusiast, I have so much catching up to do, and obviously I have about 10% of my collection is 4K. I have about 3,000 Blu-rays and 300 4K discs. So it's just a matter of being a collector right now. You can't be hyper focused on, I'm not going to buy that movie on Blu-ray because it might come out on 4K. Now, we can never predict this, but you just have to sort of think about which titles actually have a shot at 4K and which don't. And if they don't, you're probably okay buying the 1080p Blu-ray, and that's going to be the best experience you'll ever have. So those are my kind of thoughts on this whole situation, because I do see this come up a lot whenever I do a collection update and I'm showing off Blu-rays, or, occasionally I do buy a Blu-ray instead of a 4K just because I'm budgeting, and maybe I don't see the full benefit of that 4K disc, and people will say, oh, why didn't you buy the 4K? So there's many reasons, but the reality of it is Blu-ray is not a bad format. Blu-ray still has a lot of growing to do. It's only 10% of DVD right now, so there's huge potential for Blu-ray to keep expanding. And based on 4K sales being at about like 2 or 3%, we may see more stuff go to Blu-ray with 4K scans and less 4K discs coming out, just because the market's not there. Now that sucks for us 4K collectors, but at the same time, it's great to even get a disc, because a lot of these movies, as you can see, haven't even made it to Blu-ray, and there are still hundreds of thousands of movies that never even made their way to DVD. So with any new physical media release, whether it's a DVD, a Blu-ray, or a 4K disc, technically, if you're just a physical media collector, we are winning when that happens. When a new title comes to any modern format, that's a win for us collectors. So that is it for this video, but I did just want to throw those stats out there because people are always asking, how many Blu-rays are there? How many DVDs are there? This came up in a couple talks. It came up in my conversation with Heath over at Serial at Midnight when I did a collaboration with him. We talked about how much media is still working its way into a modern physical media format. And it's a really interesting topic. And I was actually surprised by some of these numbers. I had not seen these numbers before. I was not aware of them, but just the sheer amount of DVDs out there is staggering. So hopefully as a community, you guys can kind of understand where I'm coming from, rally around this. And I totally understand if you only want 4K, but just understand that that's not the only format that exists, and it's going to be the smallest of all formats by far. And then people ask me about 8K discs. I honestly think you'd be lucky if you get 100 of those if they ever get made. So you're talking about the pyramid, right, is DVDs at the bottom, Blu-rays, 4K, maybe 8K. It shrinks every time we go up. And if you truly just want to own physical media, you have to expand your horizons and take a look at other formats. And to me, that's why 1080p standard Blu-ray is still so important, even as we get into year 5 or year 6 of the 4K Ultra HD format. So thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it was informative. You learned something. I definitely did doing my research on this. Love talking about topics like this. So if you're interested in Blu-ray and movie collecting, that's what I do here. Please subscribe and leave me a like as well, so others will see this movie. I don't make movies. They'll see this video and understand, how important this is, and will obviously attract more physical media collectors, which is good for everybody in the community. Also, make sure you find me on social media. Our TikTok page is almost at 10K followers, which is crazy. Instagram is still going strong as well. You can find me on both of those platforms. And then also check out all the other links in my description for ways that you can support my channel. But again, the biggest thing, subscribe and like. That's all you need to do, and I'll be as happy as ever with the support. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, staying safe and staying healthy out there and enjoying this nice spring weather. And I'll talk to you soon.